Arizona Territory, August of 1875. The kind of heat that could peel the world bare shimmered across the desert, turning every breath into work. The noonday sun hammered the ground, bleaching the red cliffs into a pale, angry glare. Nothing moved, no birds, no cattle, just the steady crunch of hooves over cracked earth. Wes Callahan rode alone through the shallow pass, reins loose in one hand, his hat pulled low to shield his eyes. He was a big man, built like someone carved out of the same rock that shaped the canyon walls. Broad shoulders, heavy arms, and a face set in a near-permanent scowl. Folks who didn't know him thought that look meant danger. Folks who did know him understood it meant he was thinking usually too much. He'd taken this trail dozens of times and never heard more than wind and the occasional rattler. But today, something cut through the silence. A sound faint enough to dismiss but sharp enough to make him pull on the reins. A cry. High-pitched, ragged, definitely not an animal. Wes slid off the saddle in one smooth motion. His boots hit the hot sand with a dull thud. He let the reins fall. His horse knew better than to wander and moved toward the sound. His steps careful, steady, quiet. The desert hid danger 100 different ways. He rounded a scraggly mesquite tree and froze. There, in a shallow dip in the land, sat a little girl, barefoot, dust-streaked, no older than 4 or 5. Her small hands clutched a stick like it was the only weapon in the world. Tears had dried on her cheeks, leaving pale trails through the dirt. Beside her lay a woman's body, her mother. Wes guessed instantly, half covered by wind-blown sand, bonnet askew. One arm curved protectively toward the child, just not enough to shield her from the sun, or the fear etched deep in her face. The girl jerked to her feet the moment she saw him. "Don't touch her," she screamed, brandishing the stick with shaking hands. "Mama's sleeping." Wes lifted his hands, palms out. "All right," he said gently. Not touching nobody. He crouched lower so he wouldn't look so big. The girl's eyes wide, dark, terrified, never left him. He eased toward the woman, studying the way her chest lay still beneath the threadbare dress. Sunburn crept up her neck, hair matted with sweat. Her lips were cracked, peeling. She looked gone, but Wes didn't assume. He leaned in, pressed two fingers to her neck. Nothing. Then dashed just as he pulled away. A flutter, weak, unsteady, but alive. "Easy now," Wes muttered under his breath, already reaching for his canteen. "Come on, girl, stay with me." He dripped water onto a strip of cloth, cooling her forehead, wetting her lips. The child edged closer, stick still in hand, suspicion etched deep. "What's your name?" he asked without looking up. "Junie," she whispered. "Well, Junie," Wes replied. "I'm Wes, and your mama's fighting real hard, but she can't stay out here. Buzzards already spotted you." He glanced skyward. 3 of them circled lazily, waiting. The little girl's lip trembled. "She can't stay," he said softly, "and neither can you. You're coming with me, kid." He didn't wait for agreement. He moved fast, years of field medic instinct kicking in. He dragged his blanket from the horse, rigging shade between 2 stunted trees. Then he lifted the woman careful but firm and laid her beneath it. She didn't wake. She barely breathed, but breath was enough. Junie knelt beside her mother, whispering tiny encouragements Wes pretended not to hear. Once the woman was shaded, Wes rigged a sling across the saddle to support her weight for the long ride ahead. Then he lifted Junie onto the horse, settling her in front of him. She clung to his vest like it was the only thing tethering her to the world. "Will Mama be okay?" she asked, voice small. Wes looked west toward the shimmering horizon. "She's got a chance," he said. "Let's make sure she gets it." And with that, the 3 of them, man, child, and the woman clinging to life, rode toward the burning sky. The desert heat clung to Wes Callahan like a second skin as he trudged across the shifting sand. Eleanor's limp body balanced across his shoulders. The sun was dropping, but the heat still wrapped around him like a furnace. Every breath tasted like dust and iron. Every step felt heavier than the last. Junie stayed close, clutching the back of Wes's shirt. Her tiny legs stumbled over the uneven ground, but she never once let go. "Mama," she whispered over and over, like the word alone could keep the woman alive. "Mama, I'm here." Wes said nothing. Talking wasted energy he couldn't spare. Instead, He kept his focus ahead toward the distant outline of his ranch, a small, lonely structure tucked between a bluff and a patch of scrubland where the desert softened into gold, miles still. He felt Eleanor's faint breath against his neck. It came and went like a candle flickering in a draft. Too slow, too shallow, too close to failing. Stay with me, he muttered, adjusting his grip without breaking stride. You hear me? Don't quit now. By late afternoon, the house finally rose through the wavering heat, small, sturdy. Waiting. West didn't slow. He crossed the yard with long, determined strides and kicked the door open with his boot. Inside, cool shadows wrapped around him. He lowered Eleanor carefully onto the cleanest cot in the back room. Stay with her, he told Junie. The girl scrambled up beside her mother, holding her hand with both of hers. Wes pivoted and got to work. He lit the stove, boiled water, pulled down the old metal box from the shelf, a dented field medic kit he hadn't opened in years. Inside, bandages. Stiff with age, herbs he'd dried himself, needles that had seen too much, a nearly empty bottle of carbolic acid. He prepared a brew of crushed chamomile, willow bark, and bitter roots. The smell filled the room, earthy, sharp, hopeful. Back and forth he moved, dipping cloths into cool water, pressing them to her forehead, coaxing drops into her mouth when she could swallow. He kept her on her side to prevent choking. Every hour he returned to check her pulse, counting out the faint beats against his fingertips like a metronome holding death at bay. When night fell, Wes dragged his stool between the beds. Eleanor lay on the cot. Junie curled on the floor beside her, her small hand clinging to the fabric of her mother's shift. Wes sat upright, Bowie knife in one hand, to fingers on Eleanor's neck, counting. He didn't sleep. By the third night, the girl woke first, voice fragile. Is Mama an angel now? Wes looked at her, then back at Eleanor's flushed, sweat-soaked face. No, he said, firm as bedrock. She's fighting too hard to be one yet. Junie gave a tiny nod and leaned back against her mother. Exhausted, that night, the fever turned vicious. It began with shivers so violent the cot rattled. Then Eleanor's skin burned with a heat that felt unnatural. Her back arched, teeth clenched, arms flailing. Junie screamed. Wes threw his weight across the bed, bracing her limbs. Her entire body trembled like it was trying to escape itself. Finally, Wes grabbed his small blade. I'm sorry, he whispered. He pricked her swollen arm, releasing the angry red line of infection that had crept along beneath her skin. Dark, foul blood seeped out, poison cooked by the desert sun. He tied a tight strip of linen, wiped her down with cool water, ground more herbs with quick, practiced hands, and when her breathing grew too shallow, he jabbed a sharpened needle into her shoulder to relieve pressure, an old battlefield trick. He prayed still worked. Hours dragged on. Junie clung to his sleeve, face streaked with tears and sweat. Please, she begged. Don't let her go. Wes didn't answer. He was too busy fighting for a life that wasn't his. When dawn finally broke, pale and gold, Eleanor stirred. Her chest lifted, then fell, steady. Her eyes fluttered open. Mama, Junie whispered, half sob, half laugh. Eleanor's voice rasped from cracked lips. Junie. Wes leaned back, exhaustion crashing over him in a wave. Welcome back, Mum, he muttered. For the first time in days, hope filled the room. The first thing Eleanor became aware of was pain, dull, deep, and everywhere. It thrummed through her limbs like the echo of a long nightmare she wasn't quite free from. Then came the smells, dust, dry wood, and something herbal simmering gently in the air. Her eyelids fluttered, heavy as stone. The world swam into focus slowly, a dim room lit by a single oil lamp, shutters rattling from the desert wind. Sand hissed against the wood like a whispering warning. Suddenly panic seized her. Junie. Her voice cracked like she'd swallowed fire. A tiny shape stirred beside her. Mama? Jun's voice was small and hoarse, her hand resting lightly on Eleanor's ribs. The child's eyes were swollen from crying. Her hair tangled from nights spent curled against the cot. Eleanor tried to sit up, but pain lanced through her chest. Her breath hitched, panic rising. A shadow moved in the doorway. She gasped. Don't come closer, she snapped, fear sharpening instantly. Wes froze, hands open, feet planted, expression calm, almost too calm. I ain't your jailer, he said quietly. I'm the fool who kept your heart beating." She didn't seem to hear him. Her eyes darted around the dim room, searching the shadows for threats she'd known before, threats with familiar voices and familiar cruelty. "Where am I?" she demanded. "Who sent you? Was it Nathan's brother? Did he find me?" Wes kept his distance, voice low and even. "No one sent me. You were dying. Your girl was beating off buzzards with a stick. I brought you here because I couldn't leave you there." She stared at him, chest heaving. Junie tugged gently on her sleeve. "It's okay, Mama," she whispered. "He gave us bread." Eleanor blinked at that, her expression flickering, confusion breaking through panic. She looked down at her bruised arms, the sweat-damp fabric, her trembling hands. Her voice cracked. "What did you do to me?" Wes didn't flinch. "I kept you alive," he said simply, "with what little I had." He stepped back another pace, giving her more space. "If you'd rather be dead." He nodded toward the door. "You're welcome to walk back into the sand, but your girl deserves more." Silence settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Outside, the wind howled harder. Inside, Eleanor's breath slowed. Her shoulders sagged as the adrenaline drained from her body. "Water," she whispered. Wes nodded once, disappeared, and returned with a tin cup. He didn't come close, just set it on the edge of the cot where she could reach it. She drank in small sips, her hands shaking so badly some spilled onto her shift. "You've been here for days," Wes said quietly. "You nearly didn't make it through the first night." Fever hit hard. Eleanor looked at him, eyes fogged with exhaustion. "I remember. Nothing, just heat." And Junie crying. Junie crawled closer, slipping under her mother's arm. "I stayed," she said proudly. "I didn't leave." Eleanor pressed her lips to her daughter's tangled hair, a broken whisper escaping her. "I should have kept you safe." "I'm so sorry." Junie nestled closer. "I wasn't scared. Mr. Wes was here." Eleanor's gaze snapped back to Wes, sharp and raw. "Why?" she asked. Wes hesitated, jaw tightening. He stared at the floor, somewhere safer than the memory behind the question. "Because I lost someone once." He swallowed hard. "My sister. Too much blood. Not enough time. I promised myself, if I ever had another chance." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Eleanor's eyes softened, not with trust, not yet, but with understanding. "You were a doctor?" "Army medic," he said. "Confederate side. After the war, I came out here to forget it all." She studied him, broad shoulders, tired eyes, hands scarred from old work. "A man shaped by loss, not violence. My husband died last spring," she said quietly. "His brother came before his grave cooled. Claimed Junie was inheritance. Offered to marry me or take her." Wes's brows knit together in disgust. "So you ran," he said. Softly. She nodded. "And someone's looking for you." Wes didn't have to say it. The truth already hung in the air between them. But before she could speak, Junie curled tighter against her chest. "Mama's really back," the girl said. For the first time in years, tears filled Eleanor's eyes. She didn't fight them. "Thank you," she whispered. Wes turned away, giving her privacy. "I've seen death," he murmured. "You don't smell like it anymore." Outside, the wind eased. Inside, something steadier began to grow. Word travels fast in small towns, faster than horses, faster than whiskey, faster than common sense. So when a well-dressed stranger stepped off the midday stagecoach in town, the whispers began before his boots even touched the dirt. He wore polished shoes, a stiff coat, and an expression colder than a winter creek. Tucked under his arm were papers, official-looking, sharp-cornered, heavy with ink and law. He pinned notices to posts and storefronts, the parchment snapping in the wind. "Missing, Eleanor Rusk and minor child, Juniper Rusk, suspected unstable. Contact requested by the Rusk family estate." By sundown, half the town had read it. Some frowned, some shrugged. Others remembered seeing a tall rancher buying flour and thread not long ago, with a quiet woman and a brown-haired little girl at his side. 2 days later, a ranch hand brought Wes the flyer. The man handed it over without a word. Wes read it once, then again. His jaw locked so hard he tasted metal. But instead of crushing the paper, he folded it carefully like it might shatter. Back at the ranch, Eleanor was brushing Junie's hair on the porch. Junie giggled at something her mother whispered, her legs kicking happily against the boards. Wes approached quietly. Eleanor looked up, smiling until she saw the paper in his hand. The smile dropped. Color drained from her face. She took the flyer, read it, and her fingers began to tremble. Without a sound, she rose and walked inside. Wes followed in the kitchen. She gripped the counter like it was the only thing holding her upright. "I have to leave," she whispered. "Tonight." "No," Wes said. "You don't understand," Eleanor insisted, voice shaking. "If they find me here, if they think you've hidden me, they'll take your land, your name, everything you've built." Wes stepped closer, voice low and solid. "That girl called you Mama," he said, "and she called me brave. I ain't letting go of that." Eleanor shook her head, breath catching. "You don't know what these people are," she whispered. "They have money. They have lawyers. They have power." Wes didn't blink. "I've seen men with all three," he said. "Bullets go through 'em just the same." That night, Wes didn't sleep. He sat outside by the barn, rifle across his knees, hat tipped low. The desert was quiet to quiet, the kind that meant trouble was listening. Around midnight, a twig snapped. Wes didn't move, didn't speak, didn't breathe. A figure crept along the fence stall, cloaked, stepping slow as a snake through tall grass. The silhouette paused at the gate, scanning the house. Wes waited until the man crossed onto his land. Then, crack, the rifle shot split the night like a lightning strike. The bullet slammed into the post 6 inches from the man's head. Wes rose from the shadows. "You've got 2 choices," he said, voice quiet but carrying death in it. "Walk away right now, or let me dig you a new bed in my garden." The figure didn't wait to think. He ran, tripping, stumbling, bolting into the dark so fast he left a cloud of dust behind him. Wes waited until silence settled again. Then he turned. Eleanor stood in the doorway, wrapped in a blanket, eyes wide. "He's gone," Wes said simply. Eleanor nodded once. "You didn't even ask who he was." "I don't need to," Wes replied. He wasn't welcome. They sat on the porch until dawn, Wes with his rifle resting against his leg, Eleanor watching the sky brighten slowly. The sun crept over the horizon, warming the chilled boards. She finally spoke. I thought running was the only way to keep Junie safe." Wes shrugged slightly. "Maybe nowhere is safe," he said. "But this ain't nowhere." At that moment, Junie pattered out barefoot, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Did the bad man leave?" she whispered. "He did," Wes said. Eleanor pulled her daughter close, pressing a trembling kiss into her hair, and with the morning light warming their faces, she realized something. This wasn't just a hiding place. This was home. The days that followed settled into a rhythm of quiet, steady heartbeat that wrapped itself around the ranch. Morning sun stretched across the mesas, golden and wide, brushing the land awake. And for the first time in years, laughter, small, bright, child-sized, echoed across Wes Callahan's property. Junie had claimed a pony. Well, Wes had given her one, but the way the little girl marched around the yard, hand wrapped in the reins of the patient old mare named Bess, it certainly looked like she had done the claiming. Wes had fashioned a makeshift saddle pad from an old flour sack, tied neatly under the pony's belly. "Keep your knees light," he coached, walking beside her. "Let her feel your breathing. Horses listen better than folks do." Junie giggled, swaying with the pony's slow steps. "You're better at this than half the grown men I've seen," Wes said with a grin. Inside the cabin, Eleanor stirred a pot of stew, sleeves rolled, hair pinned back. She moved around the kitchen like she'd lived there her whole life, measuring, chopping, humming under her breath. Every evening she set bread to rise. Every morning she kneaded dough with steady hands. She'd taken over the kitchen in the quiet, confident way only a woman who had fought too hard for too long could do. One evening, as they shelled beans on the porch, Eleanor spoke softly without looking up. "I was training to be a nurse back east," she said. "Before everything fell apart." Wes lifted his head slightly, listening. "I wanted to open a small pharmacy," she continued. "Sell medicine, teas, maybe treat children for fevers. But then my father arranged my marriage, and dreams don't grow well under someone else's name." He nodded slowly. "My sister used to dream big too," he said. "Wrote stories, wanted to teach. but the cholera hit our town before I could get back with medicine. Eleanor reached across the table, her fingers brushing the faded scar on his forearm, the one he tried not to look at. You saved me, she whispered. Maybe that counts for her too. Wes didn't answer, but something in his shoulders loosened ever so slightly. 2 mornings later, that fragile piece shattered. A buggy rolled into the yard, black paint gleaming like a warning. A man stepped out. His coat was stiff. His cane had silver tips. His vest bore the badge of the Prescott Legal Office. Wes stepped forward, rifle slung casual but ready. Can I help you? He asked. The man adjusted his spectacles. Eleanor Rusk is harboring a minor, Juniper Rusk, under false guardianship, he declared. The estate of the late Horace Rusk seeks the child. For her welfare and legal security. Eleanor went pale. Junie hid behind her mother's skirt. I have court papers, the man added, pulling out documents tied with a red ribbon. Wes didn't even glance at them. I've got land, he said calmly, and enough sense to smell a snake under a silk coat. The lawyer stiffened. This is lawful business, he hissed. Eleanor's voice broke into pieces. You're not taking her. She's my baby. Junie screamed her mother's name. The lawyer stepped forward. He didn't get far. Wes moved like a storm, breaking fast, controlled, unshakable. He stepped between Eleanor and the lawyer, towering over the man without lifting the rifle. You touch them, Wes said quietly, and I'll bury your papers in my yard and your pride right beside it. The lawyer stumbled back, trembling with outrage. I'll take this to court, he snapped. Wes nodded. You do that. But until then, you leave my land. The man backed toward his buggy, glaring with all the fire of a man used to winning. He climbed in, snapped the reins, and rode off, dust rising like smoke behind him. When he was gone, Eleanor collapsed to her knees, arms tight around Junie. Mama's here, the girl whispered tremulously. Mama's here. Wes stood on the porch, jaw tight, rifle still slung over his shoulder. He said nothing, but his stance said everything. A line had been drawn, and no one lawyer, estate, or ghost of her past would cross it without going through him first. Asterisk. They left before sunrise, not because Wes was scared. Fear wasn't something he wasted time on, but because danger had a way of gaining ground when you stood still too long. Eleanor didn't argue. She wrapped Junie in a shawl, kissed her daughter's forehead, and held her close as Wes saddled the strongest mare and hitched a small wagon. He packed only what mattered: water, bread, bandages, a Bible, and a rusted tin of bullets he prayed he wouldn't need. They rolled out just as the first thin strip of sunlight cracked across the flats, painting the sand in pale gold. The ranch behind them grew smaller and smaller, until it became nothing more than a memory in the dust. We can't keep running forever. Wes, Eleanor whispered. He didn't look at her. I'm not running, he said quietly. I'm leading. He jerked his chin toward the western ridge. There's a man in Marble Ridge. Preacher. I pulled shrapnel from his lung at Gettysburg. He owes me, and he marries folks. Quiet, Eleanor's eyes snapped to him. You think marriage will stop them? It won't stop wolves, Wes said. But it'll slow lawyers. They traveled in silence for hours. The sun climbed high and cruel, beating the wagon with relentless heat. Dust curled along the road like restless ghosts. Junie woke slowly, blinking sleep from her eyes. Thirsty. Wes passed her the canteen. Sip slow, sweetheart. She nodded, her little fingers wrapped tight around the metal dot. By noon, they found shade beneath a crumbling rock wall. A few distant vultures circled the horizon, a reminder of the danger always waiting for the weak. Eleanor sat beside Wes, Junie curled in her lap. Why are you risking your life for us? She asked quietly. For a long moment, Wes said nothing. Then, without looking at her, he answered, because I failed once, and I ain't doing it again. The words hit her like a quiet storm. She reached out hesitantly at first, then gently placed her fingers on his wrist. Not fear, not obligation, connection. They moved again before dusk. The sky shifted to copper. The wind rose, carrying the uneasy scent of something brewing far off. A storm's coming. Wes muttered. Junie pointed toward the east. Mama, look. There's dust. Eleanor turned. A wall. A monstrous, rolling wall of sand. Boiling, snarling, alive. Wes's voice cracked like a whip. Hold on. He snapped the reins. The wagon lurched forward so violently Eleanor had to brace herself to keep from falling. She wrapped her arms around Junie, shielding the girl with her body as the world exploded into chaos. The storm crashed into them with a roar so loud it drowned out everything: words, breath, thoughts. Sun sliced through the air like needles. The horses panicked, rearing and pulling against the harness. Visibility dropped to inches. "Wes!" Eleanor cried, but her voice was swallowed whole. Wes leapt off the saddle, dropping low to the ground, pulling a scarf over his mouth. "Stay down," he shouted, though he couldn't see if they heard him. Then suddenly Junie was gone. "Junie!" Eleanor screamed, stumbling blindly into the swirling dust. "Junie, please!" The storm clawed at her, dragging her down. Her knees hit the sand hard, but she kept crawling, hands sweeping frantically. Wes's heart slammed against his ribs. He dropped to all fours, crawling, searching the ground inch by inch. A sound reached him. Faint, frightened, a tiny cry. He scrambled toward it, ripping his hands and arms on thorns he couldn't even see. His shirt tore. Blood ran down his back. Then a small shape beneath a low mesquite bush. Junie, curled into a ball, shaking, hands over her ears. Wes scooped her up, holding her tight to his chest, shielding her from the storm with his body. He could feel her little heart hammering against his ribs. "I got you," he rasped. "I got you, sweetheart." Through the furious wind, he heard Eleanor calling, broken, terrified. He staggered toward her voice, and she appeared through the dust, stumbling, eyes wild. When she saw Junie, she collapsed to her knees, sobbing. I thought, she's safe," Wes said, barely able to speak. "You both are." Eleanor threw her arms around both of them, shaking with relief. Her hands brushed his torn back, feeling the blood and sweat and grit. "I'm sorry," she cried. "I never meant to drag you into this." Wes shook his head. "You didn't drag me," he said softly. "I stepped in." And then, like it had spent all its fury, the storm began to fall silent. The world around them looked peeled raw, stripped down to bone and truth. Eleanor leaned her forehead against his chest. Junie curled between them. "If we live through this," she whispered, voice shaking, "I'll never run again." Wes closed his eyes. "Then we better live." In the broken stillness of the desert, battered by fear, blood, and the storm's wrath, they did. The small adobe church rose out of the desert like the last prayer of a dying world, leaning slightly, cracked along the edges, half swallowed by drifting sand, but still standing, still fighting. Wes rode hard into the churchyard, the mare panting beneath him. Eleanor slumped in his arms, skin pale, lips cracked, breath shallow. Junie clung to the saddle horn in front of him, dust streaked across her little face. The preacher stepped out from a side door, squinting through the haze of leftover storm dust. "Wes Callahan," he shouted. "What in God's name?" "She's fading," Wes yelled back, swinging off the saddle in one fluid motion. "She needs a reason to keep breathing." He scooped Eleanor into his arms without effort, holding her like she weighed no more than a bundle of cloth. "Marry us," Wes said, voice low and shaking. "Now, or she won't make it." The preacher looked into Wes's eyes, saw the same fire he'd seen years ago when Wes had dragged his broken body off a battlefield and stitched his lungs shut with bloody fingers and prayers. He stepped aside. "Bring her inside." The chapel was dim, lit by the last slivers of evening sun squeezing through the shutters. Candle wax dripped down long-forgotten holders. The scent of cedar and old hymns lingered in the air. Wes laid Eleanor across the altar bench. Her eyelids fluttered. "Where?" she whispered. "You're with me," Wes murmured. "You're home." The preacher fetched water for Eleanor, then guided Junie to sit at her mother's side. He stood behind the altar, voice steady despite the wind rattling the walls. "Wesley Callahan, Eleanor Rusk, do you come before God and this child to bind your lives?" The wind suddenly howled, battering the shutters so hard they shook. Junie jumped. Wes rested a hand on her shoulder. "It's just the storm," he whispered. "Nothing louder than your mama's heart." The preacher continued, raising his voice over the wind. "You stand not in finery, but in truth, not in comfort, but in need. Speak now your vows." Wes knelt beside Eleanor, taking her limp hand in his. "I ain't ever been a man of fancy words," he said softly. But I can promise you this. I won't leave, not ever. I'll be the arms that hold you and the ground you stand on." Eleanor's lips trembled. She forced them apart. "I never believed in second chances," she rasped. "But you came like mercy with a shotgun." The preacher smiled faintly. Junie stepped forward, hands shaking, and pulled a frayed ribbon from Eleanor's satchel. She wrapped it around their joined hands. "This means you're tied now," she whispered. Wes looked into Eleanor's eyes. "We already were." "Kid," the preacher raised his hand, "by the strength of your bond and the witness of this child, I pronounce you husband and wife." Outside, the wind wailed. Inside, something broke open, something warm and fierce, glowing brighter than the candles. That night, they did not return to the trail. Instead, Wes stayed beside Eleanor in the chapel loft, her head resting against his chest, her breathing finally steady and sure. Junie slept curled on her mother's other side, her small hand resting on Eleanor's hip like an anchor. Wes didn't sleep. He watched the rise and fall of Eleanor's chest, counted each breath like a blessing, listened to the slowing storm outside. "You've got my name now," he whispered into her hair. "That means you don't go alone." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. For the first time in years, Eleanor Rusk, now Eleanor Callahan, was safe, not running, not hiding, not afraid. She was claimed. She was held. She was home. A month passed. The dust settled. The desert heat softened. And on the quiet edge of West Callahan's ranch, the world finally began to breathe again. One morning, a rider brought a thick envelope stamped with the seal of the Tucson courthouse. Wes broke the wax and scanned the pages. He didn't smile, not really, but something in his eyes softened. He handed the letter to Eleanor. Her fingers trembled as she read. Then she read it again. Slower this time. "The adoption is approved," she whispered. "And the marriage. They recognize it." She looked up, eyes blurring with tears she didn't bother hiding. "She's ours now." Wes shook his head gently. "She's always been." Junie was learning her letters, slow, stubborn, and proud of every crooked one. Every day Eleanor sat beside her with a slate and chalk, coaching her through wobbly lines and backward J's. One morning, Wes rounded the barn and stopped short. On a fence post, scratched in shaky chalk strokes, were the words, "Mama." Wes ran a thumb over them, his heart snagging on something soft and unexpected. Inside the house, Eleanor had begun gathering herbs again, bundles of mint, chamomile, and sage hanging from muslin sheets on the porch. She kept a notebook open on the kitchen table, sketching ideas for a remedy shop. She tapped the page one morning. "It'll go right here," she said, pointing toward a corner of the barn. "Shelves, jars, salves, teas, a place where folks can come for help." Wes squinted at the crude drawing. "And what's that supposed to be?" "The sign," she said, smiling proudly. He leaned in, reading the hand-drawn letters, "Rusk and Callahan Remedies, Cures, Tonics, and Kindness." Wes chuckled softly. "I like the third one best." Eleanor lifted her chin. "That one was yours." Days unfolded with a kind of peace none of them had known before. They planted an herb garden together, turned an old storage shed into an apothecary corner. Wes built shelves while Junie tried grinding herbs with a pestle nearly bigger than her arm. Life didn't just return, it grew. And then, late one night, long after Junie had drifted into sleep, Eleanor sat by lamplight writing a letter. She folded it carefully and placed it inside a small wooden box carved with Junie's initials. She tucked the box beneath her daughter's pillow. The letter inside read, "My dearest girl, the man who saved me was not an angel. He was a man with hands strong enough to dig graves or grow gardens. He chose the second. He chose us. Love, Mama." The next morning, Wes was outside early, working a piece of pine with a chisel he had sharpened special. Eleanor leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, watching the slow movements of his hands. When he finished, he sanded the final letter smooth and lifted the plank. He hung it high across the ranch gate. The wood gleamed honeygold in the rising sun. The sign read, "The Callahans' 3 hearts. One home." Eleanor stepped closer, fingers brushing the carved letters. "It's perfect," she whispered. Junie burst from the house, hair wild, chalk still smudged on her palms. She twirled across the porch, shouting between giggles, "Mama's not sleeping anymore. Mama's got a name again." Eleanor laughed and scooped her daughter up. Wes reached out and wrapped his arms around them both, drawing them close against his chest. No more running, no more storms, no more graves waiting in the sand, just 3 hearts beating beneath the same sky. And as the desert wind blew warm across the homestead, Eleanor leaned her head on Wes's shoulder. Junie's arms looped around both of them, and she finally whispered the words she had never dared speak before. "We're home." The frontier had taken so much from them, but in the end, it gave them everything that mattered.